Welcome to AfricaCom 2016, live from Cape Town, South Africa. We're joined by Deshun Deysel, entrepreneur, public speaker, mentor, coach, and mountaineer. Welcome, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, it's a real pleasure to be here.
You have such a busy week. You're going to be part of our ASTARS program, Leaders in Africa keynotes and panel discussion. I want to get into all of that, into your coaching as part of Deshun Deysel and Associates, but I kind of want to talk about your background first. You're known as the first Black South African or Black lady to climb Mount Everest, plant the democratic South African flag on the top of Mount Everest. How did you first become interested in climbing? Where did that passion stem from?
Well, I think, Amy, one of the things I need to qualify is that I was part of the first team of South Africans to plant the flag on the top of Mount Everest, and because of that, it gets noted all over the place. I actually did in history. There's a lady who does all the research, and she says that that I was, in fact, the first Black woman in the world to step foot on the slopes of Everest. So it's a real privilege, but that wasn't the reason I climbed in the first place. The real reason I climbed is because I had a childhood dream. I've always envisioned this idea of being a high adventurer, someone who climbed mountains, jumped out of aeroplanes. That's always been the kind of life that I envisaged for myself when I was little, but it was almost impossible because, back in apartheid South Africa, it was a ridiculous thing for a little township girl to think she's going to live like one day. And now I can stand back and say I've actually done all of those things. So it really did stem out of a childhood dream.
It's a wonderful accomplishment, and I know you come from a strong background of education, and to a certain degree that still dominates a lot of what you do. What is it about the field of education and teaching and coaching that still excites you today after 20 years starting out as a teacher originally?
Well, I think there are two things that really drive my thought process here. The one is I've seen the impact education has had on my own life, not just in class education, but education from traveling, from interacting with new people, from kind of just putting yourself out there and being willing to learn. And on the other hand, I've seen how some certain educational techniques are actually the type of techniques that make people effective in learning more. So looking at both these things, sort of the personal experience with the scientific methodology, it's ever changing, ever growing, ever learning, and yet there are some fundamentals that remain the same. So it's about how to tweak those fundamentals to make them relevant for our time, for 21st century learning, for leadership, for personal effectiveness, and that really keeps me going. I love to learn.
That's wonderful, and that's a strong theme of AfricaCom as well, together with socioeconomic empowerment and upliftment. And you've been really vocal and instrumental in a number of key initiatives in South Africa and the continent as a whole. You're a Laureus Sports Ambassador. How did you first get involved in those initiatives, and what are some of the successes you've been able to bring about in African communities?
Well, I have to say that being part of the Laureus family is really one of the biggest privileges of my life. The Laureus Sport for Good Foundation is really the foundational stuff that Laureus does. I think most people in the world will know Laureus for the Laureus World Sports Award, which happens every year. But really at the foundation of Laureus is the idea of bringing about social change through sport, through physical activity. And I'm an ambassador and a trustee for Laureus in South Africa. And I've just seen some really grassroots projects deliver amazing results in getting children out of socioeconomic difficulty. So we're talking about the difference between high levels of gangsterism in, for instance, the Cape Flats, and when you get kids to start playing together, how that becomes a distraction for them from signing up to gangs, for instance, and living positive lives through sport. And we've seen, we've got exciting projects like the Polo Project. We've got a surfing project for street kids in KwaZulu-Natal that Laureus is currently funding. And so it's really just the privilege of being able to see lives change through the medium of sport. And I'm just one of the few people who can say that we've got the privilege of doing that.
That's fantastic. And today you helped out as a moderator and a presenter at our ASTARS Under 30 program. You presented on From Everest to the Boardroom, and you spoke about ambition and the mountaineer mindset and being a decisive leader. But what is the mountaineer mindset, would you say?
Well, I would say for me, the Mountaineer mindset means that, life is tough, entrepreneurship is tougher. And how do you kind of marry the idea of your concept, the thing that you think might disrupt, because, disruption is the big new word that we speak of nowadays. And so the whole idea is, how do you, with the exponential rate of growth in technology and the way people grow naturally, how do you kind of match those two and become your most effective self under that circumstance? And it isn't easy. There are some things that you can rely on to be steady, but more and more, because we live in a disruptive time, there are more and more things that you cannot rely on to be steady. So you look at election results in the UK and the US, for instance. You look at riots happening all over the world, and it's the millennials driving that. So there are some things that are really causing massive disruption. There's migration from various parts of the world in thousands. So we're living in that kind of time. So how do you exponentially grow with the exponential rate of growth and still keep some things about yourself steady? So for me, the Mountaineer mindset is anticipate the change, but keep some things within yourself steady so that you don't actually lose control of the direction that you want to go into.
Wonderful. And extending that metaphor, what would you say is some of the biggest mountains or obstacles that the tech scene or youth in tech need to overcome in order to see a good, viable, enabled, effective ecosystem growing on the continent? What are some of the things we need to overcome? What summits do we have to
So
cross?
I can immediately think of three things. Number one is, I think the youth of Africa really want to be taken seriously in the tech space. So it's that idea of allow them to make mistakes, but allow them to come with their ideas. So I think the tech space is still very much dominated by baby boomers and Gen Xers, and there might even be a little bit of a fear factor of, oh my gosh, what are the millennials going to come up with now? But it's to give them that space, is to provide the platform for them. And I think the second one is really to start activating the thought process of being a tech engineer, entrepreneur for women and girls in Africa. And of course, being in Africa, we also need to see to some challenges, economic challenges. So we need to find solutions to some of our challenges here. So there's no point in trying to find the best way to disrupt first world or developed world issues, when in actual fact in Africa we've got some very basic things that need to be overcome here to make people more effective in making a sustainable life for themselves. So the tech startups of today need to simultaneously have their eye on the developed world goals, but at the same time find solutions for the problems of Africa.
And shifting now to some of the solutions, some of the positives. So tech is working as a wonderful disruptor in the space. And as a businesswoman, how have you seen tech innovating and disrupting for good on the continent, especially in female-led businesses? Have you got any examples of that? Have you seen anything firsthand?
Well, what I have seen is that just the ability to SMS can inform people. So this morning we had an example of a person who had the only phone in his village, and people needed to learn things about what's going on in the world, and he invited them to come and ask him questions, and then he would Google those questions or find them online wherever, and he would literally post the answers on a bulletin board somewhere in the village where everyone could find the answer to those questions that they had. And that in itself is a disruptor. It might sound very simple to people who are not on the continent, but if you're in deep rural Africa and there's only one cell phone and that's the only access you have to the world, then that in itself is a way to assist with some of the fundamental problems or systemic problems we have in the lack of tech in Africa. So that's one way that it can be done. And I think with women businesses, I've worked with over 300 entrepreneurs, and one of the things I've noticed, women are drawn to fashion, starting business with fashion, with catering, with feeding people, events management businesses, and therein as well, they have found ways to liaise with partners. If you've got an events company and you need catering done, then those two businesses come together just by virtue of the fact that they're both on Facebook. So people put out a shout out on Facebook, I've got this event, so many people, I need someone to make a pot of curry for that many people, and then they get about 5 or 6 different responses, and that brings women's businesses together as well.
Looking at women's businesses collaboration, this week you're collaborating with Basila Bakoko of Empretech. You're going to be leading on a keynote, Leaders in Keynote, and a panel discussion with her. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty, I don't want you to give too much away, but what can delegates expect from those sessions?
I think delegates can expect perhaps a fresh perspective. You know, I'm not a tech business myself, but I'm finding more and more that my business needs to go into the digital space and ways to innovate in that space, doing what I do. And I think the viewers can kind of expect a bit of a discussion around how businesses like mine can become more and more tech savvy and more digitized. So part of my vision for my business, for instance, is to become 75% digital or online by 2022. And I mean, that's not a very long time from now, and at the moment we are not that digitized, so there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm happy to get into that conversation, and I'd really like to be able to uncover that and perhaps, you know, get some ideas from the audience too. I like the idea of conversation rather than just listening to a person speak on their ideas, because, you know, you don't really get collaboration that way. So yes, I think Basila and I will have a really nice discussion on how women can be brought into the fold in the tech space, and just what leadership looks like in Africa in the 21st century.
Wonderful. And I want to end on a little bit of advice, really. So as a businesswoman and a mentor, what advice would you give to young people and women who've got that entrepreneurial drive, but just want a little bit of advice on how to get started, how to, you know, take that leap of faith?
How to take the leap of faith? My goodness, it does really require that. It requires a bit of courage. So, you know, if you find that you are so comfortable with that paycheck that you complain about every month, but you've got some great ideas, it's really to take courage and to say, I'm willing to test these ideas out, and also to you know, one of the things that catapulted me into becoming an entrepreneur was I was working for an organization where they kept saying that can't be done, and I had ideas, and I thought, well, if we can't do it in this organization, what's going to happen to my idea? So the only thing I could do is actually start my own business so that I could see how far the idea could go, you know. So it's that kind of thing. It's to take courage, it's to believe in your idea enough, and believing in yourself enough that if something goes wrong, you can overcome it, because there's so many resources around now anyway. The second thing I would say is find out about your industry. Know the compliance issues that you need to deal with. I think so many businesses start with a passion of the entrepreneur, but without business training. So I would say sign up for some kind of, even if it's online, business training as soon as possible, before you actually make that leap of faith, because it just creates a little bit of a foundation on where to go next, you know, so that you don't kind of fall all over the place and take every suggestion that comes your way. And find a mentor or a coach that also plays a huge role in being able to be directive with your business.
Thank you so much for your advice, and we hope you have a wonderful AfricaCom, and we can't wait to see you again later in the week. Thank you.
I really look forward to it. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.